Welcome to Live Action Star Wars. I'm James.
I'm Ralph.
And today we have a very special bonus episode for you. We were going to release this as a data link one, but this is just going to be a regular episode now. We normally do these live, as you know, but today we have got with us a very special guest. We've got Mr. Gary Whitta joining us today.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, Gary.
Doing
how are
great.
you?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here. I've done many of the Star Wars podcasts over the years, and I've got to know a bunch of those guys, and I love all of them. But I think this is my first time doing this one, so I've added another one to the collection.
It is, yeah. I mean, we've been trying to get it scheduled for a little while, but you've been busy with a book coming out, so we want to know,
I'm very I'll only talk to you if I've got something to shamelessly promote. So here I am.
True professional.
So let me ask you this, and we haven't brought this up yet. You've been on many Star Wars podcasts. Have any of them talked to you about Animal Crossing?
I think so. I mean, I think at the time when I was first doing them, and the talk show that I did based in Animal Crossing was still a thing. I did that back in 2020. Yeah, I imagine it's come up. We mostly talk about Star Wars, obviously, because that's what Star Wars podcasts are for. But yeah, I have a tendency to meander and go off on tangents. So whether they ask about it or not, like a lot of non-Star Wars stuff. Why did you have something you specifically wanted to ask me about that?
I mean, no, it's just for me, during lockdown, I was put on furlough, and then I was just unemployed while everything was shut down. My wife works from home, and so I would sit on the couch while she worked and work on my island. And so I just became obsessed with this game that I wouldn't have otherwise. And so I sort of fell steep into Animal Crossing, watching your show. And then I started making Star Wars characters. I started making outfits that people can use for like literally any character you think of. Like if you want to wear a Dodonna jacket, you can wear a Dodonna jacket in Animal Crossing, thanks to me.
Yeah, I think at this point, there's probably so many different fandoms that have done that with the custom outfits. No, I never get tired of hearing about it. As you mentioned, Animal Crossing came out during the pandemic, like right in the dog days of the pandemic as well. Yeah. It was like, oh my God, how long are we going to be stuck in our homes? And it was, my kid was homeschooled. We were just talking about it the other day. It was miserable, right? It seems like a million years away now. And COVID is obviously still going on, but it's not what it was when we were all like really locked down. And I remember like, I lived with my wife, and at the time, my daughter, now we have two. But at the time, it's like, it doesn't matter how much you love each other. If you are cooped up together 24/7, you will start to get on each other's nerves and, starting to snip at each other a little bit, and you start to go a bit stir crazy. What I remember was that Animal Crossing came into the house, and the mood in the house just kind of lifted immediately. Everyone started making their islands, and it really did end up having kind of a cultural moment. Animal Crossing was kind of one of the games, if not the game,
they lucked out on that release window so well.
Yeah, and I don't think it was delayed. That wasn't originally the release date. They delayed it. I don't know, maybe Nintendo knew something that we didn't, but they released it at exactly the right moment. And it did become kind of a cultural thing. The mainstream media got onto it, celebrities were playing it. And it really was exactly the antidote that we needed. Again, we were cooped up, we were miserable, life totally sucked. And it was
just a small bit of
Trump
joy.
Was president, like it was just awful all around. And that game just was like, basically forget about all that. Come live on a lovely kind of tropical cartoon island where everyone is your friend, and maybe the worst thing that can happen to you is you get stung by a wasp. And that was like just what we needed, right? You don't have to do anything. It's not like even a game in the traditional sense. Just hang out, make friends, grow turnips, just chill. And it was just exactly what people needed. And I was playing it a lot for that reason. And as you mentioned, I was goofing around on Twitch, playing the game on Twitch. And there's a longer version of this story, but we want to get to the Star Wars and other stuff. I ended up building like a talk show set in the basement of my house, and we started doing a live late night talk show that was set inside Animal Crossing called Animal Talking. And it started off just like me hanging out with my friends. As I recall, the second show was literally on the couch. I was the host, and on the couch was just like my wife and her friend. Like it was just hanging out with people. Yeah. But then it started to Twitch put it on their front page because they thought that we were doing something innovative. And the next thing you know, like we had real celebrity publicists calling me up, because you have to remember back in that period, all the quote unquote real talk shows were dark, right? They either weren't able to produce a show at all, or it was like Jimmy Fallon in his broom cupboard interviewing people over Zoom, and it just wasn't good. But we were actually able to kind of in a virtual way. We were the only real talk show that had like a band and a set and a couch, and it actually felt like a talk show because there's no COVID in the metaverse, right? We can have as many people in that room as we wanted to, and no one needs to mask up. And I guess a lot of celebrities that were bored and had nothing better to do because all their movies were shut down and nobody could work, wanted to come on the show. And we ended up with like Sting performed live music on the show. Selena Gomez debuted a new single on the show. Brie Larson, who was a big Animal Crossing player, came on and was cracking up. And Danny Trejo, who we ended up giving his own spin-off show. Lisa Loeb came on and played live music. Like, it was just crazy. We had so much fun with it. And it was one of those things where it became so popular that it actually ended up becoming kind of a hassle. It's like,
it's a real job.
Right. Yeah, it's like I've created a monster I can no longer control. And it actually became very, very stressful. And I was a writer. So even during COVID, I was still able to do my job. I was spending 20, 30 hours a week making this show. Because we did it for we did sound checks, we did tech rehearsals, we had to do music. And like when Selena came on the show, I had to spend hours with her record label clearing the music. And it's like, I've literally got Selena Gomez right here saying I can play the song. Like, are you sure this isn't okay? And on it would go. But it was fun. And I think the greatest gift from it, both at the time and like right up until now today, is hearing people say, oh my God, that was like just the tonic that I needed it put a smile on my face during the pandemic, which is exactly that was my dream for it. If you're interested, all of those episodes I think we did 25 episodes, are still all archived on my YouTube channel. You can go to youtube.com/Gary Whitta and find all of the Animal Talking episodes.
Perfect.
It just sounds very similar in terms of style to the way our friends at the George Lucas Talk Show do their thing.
I did the George Lucas.
I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure you've been on there
live in San Francisco, just recently as part of SF Sketchfest, the comedy festival that they have here. And then there was all kinds of weird options. So the comedian Paul Scheer came on and told us about, he actually hosted an official Star Wars talk show, which was kind of like Space Ghost, but he was basically, I think he was Darth Vader sitting behind the desk of a late night talk show set. And they had like Lobot was the band leader. I guess he's supposed to be like a Paul Schaefer because they're both bald or whatever. And it was hilarious. And it was an official like Lucasfilm production, but they never put it out. Like it got canned. But Paul, I don't think we were ever able to show them, but Paul sent me some pictures from behind the scenes. It was hilarious. I wish they had done it. I used to love Space Ghost Coast to Coast. So like that was really kind of what we were channeling. I think it's what Paul was trying to do with the Star Wars show as well.
That's great. It's so much fun hearing like everyone's stories about the different things that they were doing and just ways that creative people were staying creative during that time.
And it really couldn't have existed at any other time. And in fact, I was thinking about maybe bringing it back during the writer's strike because it's the same problem, right? All the celebrities are stuck at home. They can't work. They can't promote their shows, but they could. And it was. I remember thinking, it was too much hassle, and I'm really lazy. Like, let's let it be. I'm always very aware of like. One of my rules is like you don't do the same joke twice. Like you if you have a hit with a joke, remember like George Costanza makes everyone laugh and he just leaves the room. So I'm going out on a high note. Like just leave. Let's just stop there. Like
it's the best. It's the mic drop, isn't it?
You have a hit. I remember Jerry Seinfeld always saying like even though they were throwing money at him to do like a 10th season of Seinfeld or whatever, he walked away because he said, I never want to get to a point where people are saying, do you remember when Seinfeld used to be funny? Like when you like go out on top basically. And so I always worry that if you go back, I think nostalgia is a really tricky thing, and there's a fascinating conversation to be had in the Star Wars context about this, right? I always say nostalgia ain't what it used to be, and you can make something that is as good as something that was back in the day, but it can never compete with your fuzzy memory of it, right? Like your childhood. It's why every generation, I think, thinks that, they say like every generation thinks like the best music is whatever was around when they were like 14, 15, 16 years old. It's like I'm an original trilogy guy because that's what I was around when I was growing up. There's a whole generation of kids that grew up, the prequels are Star Wars for them. And now there's an even newer generation for whom, Kylo Ren and Poe and Finn and Rey, that's their Star Wars. And so to try and go back and recapture that, it's very, very hard, I think, to recapture that feeling of nostalgia. I think at the very best it can sometimes just feel kind of bittersweet, but it's really hard to go back and recapture those memories.
I think that's the thing as well, is it's not trying to recapture them, it's just moving forward. Enjoy what you enjoy. Like you don't have to like everything new that comes out, but enjoy the stuff that you do. And
you remember what was it? What was it that Ryan said through Kylo Ren? Let the past die, kill it if you have to. I think
I love that.
There's great wisdom.
I love that line. Yeah, I've
Right.
always, I've sort of lived my life since then, just trying to sort of with that in mind. I'm just like
I think that both JJ and Ryan were very aware of, what they were inheriting and what it meant culturally. And there's a number of times in which they both, I think, snuck those little kind of meta messages into their movies. I don't know how many people picked up on this at the time, if I'm just reading too much into it, but like I was the very first time I sat down and watched The Force Awakens, if you remember the very first spoken line in that movie, "This will begin to make things right." And I'm like, oh man, like there's a meta commentary there right away. Like, I know you didn't like the prequels, but now we're going to bring you Star Wars the way you like it again. I just kind of felt there was something very almost kind of cheeky in that. It was like a mission statement. And then I think Ryan's mission statement was almost the opposite of that. It was very fascinating to see Ryan and JJ almost ping pong back and forth, right? It's like, let's go back and do things the way they were. And then Ryan's like, no, forget about the past. You got to move forward. And it was really
Something
interesting
new.
to see that almost like a conversation between two filmmakers as they pass the ball back and forth.
And I think that's the key as well. It's understanding that it is a conversation. It's not necessarily an argument. I think people get so hung up on the fact that they are very different films,
right?
And they have a very different filmmaking style. But that's not mean. It doesn't mean that they're adversarial. Like they can like coexist in the same world at all times. It's
right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
You worked on the Last Jedi comic adaptation. Correct?
I did. I adapted Ryan's movie for Marvel Comics, and that was really, really fun because it's very, very tricky when you adapt. And again, Ryan Johnson is a friend of mine. We were both at Lucasfilm when I was on Rogue. We were like in the middle of Rogue, and he was just starting on The Last Jedi, and we would hang out in the same office and like be like, "Can you believe they let us do this?" Like we still kind of couldn't believe that they had given us the keys to this.
Yeah,
the greatest toy box in history, basically. And Ryan, I knew Ryan, even like he came to the premiere of the Book of Eli back in the day, and like he's always been a great supporter of mine, and he's a great guy. So it's tricky, right? When you inherit something like that, and like you can't just word for word copy it, because what's the point? Why would I want to read a comic book that is just exactly the same as the movie? When Jodie Hauser adapted Rogue One, she really kind of went and changed a bunch of stuff, not necessarily in terms of like the core principles of the film, but like she added a lot of stuff that made reading the comic a very different experience to the movie. I don't know if I felt as comfortable doing that, because I kind of feel like if I make major changes, it's kind of me saying like, this is how I would have done it better than Ryan, like, which, I would never presume to say that, but I was able to kind of just look at it through the lens of like, well, comics are a different medium, right? And you can say things and do things in comics and in literature that you can't do in film. For example, like in comics, like internal monologue is a really, like you can hear what Batman is thinking, right? And then they'll appear in those little thought bubbles or whatever. If you hear someone's thoughts in a movie, it sounds really cheesy, right? Remember they did it in Dune. It can be really cheesy. And so, but in comics, I was able to do that. So there's the scene in Last Jedi where Leia is floating in space and she kind of like uses the Force to kind of get herself back to the ship. That's a scene that in the film plays in complete silence, and I think it works really well. In the comic, I took the opportunity to give her an internal monologue and like, let's see what she's thinking as she's doing this. And I think it was additive, but it wasn't like, I thought that should be in the movie. It's like, here's how you could, if you can do it in comics, here's how you do it in a different way. And I got to add a few things like that. The only thing that I changed that was like, I didn't like that about the movie, and so I'm going to change it for my preference. And it's really just a personal preference. Is one of my personal favorite characters in the history of Star Wars is Admiral Akbar. And I didn't like the way Ryan killed him. I was like, I feel like you should have given him a bit more props than that. And so when he dies in the comic, I just gave him one moment when he knows they're going to die, and he just turns to his crew and says, "It's been an honor serving with you all." And I just wanted to give him that moment. And so just little tiny tweaks like that, but for the most part, it's extremely faithful to the movie.
And it's a change that it doesn't alter the way that people watch the film.
That's the thing.
It's additive.
You never want to change the filmmaker's intent. It's like, what can you add or what can you reinterpret that's appropriate in the medium of comics? My favorite thing, I actually sent it to Ryan because I was so pleased with it, was when Luke, spoilers, right? This is a Star Wars podcast, so how do you know this stuff? When Luke dies at the end of Last Jedi.
Yeah.
So my memory's not what it used to be. I gave him a monologue there as well, because I think what Ryan did very subtly I kind of made a bit more overt. Like I think that
Mhm.
scene is meant to harken back to the classic scene of Luke kind of looking to the horizon on Tatooine before his journey begins. And so I added something like, my journey ends as it begins, by the light of two suns. And I just thought that was like, it's just nice to kind of have that kind of circularity, and there's a poetry to stories kind of coming full circle.
Yeah, it's great. That's nice. I've not actually read it, but now I really want to, just to go and see what other little bits and bobs.
There's some fun stuff in there, and the artwork is really beautiful. And there were, again, we added just enough, I think, to make it like, even if you've seen the movie, it's worth reading the comic.
Great. Sold. I two of the written Star Wars things that you have written that I've been a big fan of were your stories in the first two From a Certain Point of View books. I was kind of sad to see that you don't have one in the Return of the Jedi. Was that just did they approach you about anything?
There were reasons I won't go into why I was perfectly happy to not be involved in that third one, but beyond that, it's I'm just really proud of the ones that I did in the first two. People, especially the second one, because people used to say to me, and they thought it was a funny joke, "Oh, when are you going to do Rogue 2?" Well,
did it
technically? Where's the sequel? Well, technically, A New Hope is the sequel to Rogue One, and in fact, it's been really fun. As I said, knew people would do. It's been really fun to watch people edit the two together and fill in that connective tissue. And in fact, that's what I did in the first book. The story from Captain Antilles' point of view bridges the gap between Rogue One and A New Hope. And we did end up, when people say, when you do Rogue 2, I did it already. But of course, it's the story of Rogue 2, Zev Seneska from The Empire Strikes Back. Got to write the story of the pilot who finds Han and Luke when they're stranded on Hoth. So those were really fun to do. And just in terms of like a weird kind of like Star Wars EGOT boast that I have, is that I'm the only person ever to have written Star Wars for film, television, books, and comics, which is kind of a weird distinction.
Yeah, there can't be too many of you guys in that little club.
Well, there's one. So
it's just you. Wow, look at that.
And so I'm very proud of that little distinction. Yeah, I'll maybe add video game at one point, because I come from a video game background. But for right now, I'm happy to have that little brag.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think that's I mean, other than direct to audiobook, which I think Cavan Scott's got a lock on at the moment, like that's the only other medium that I could think of with.
Or radio drama.
Radio drama. Yeah.
Because I was thinking when you were talking about the differences in your version of The Last Jedi, was we've been spending some time listening to the old Star Wars radio dramas.
Oh,
and they do like alternate scenes. They have scenes with Captain Antilles and Leia and stuff. And I find it just fascinating seeing different takes on stuff. I guess some people are so sort of like beholden to canon and things having to fit and making things fit. So I like when there's essentially a certain point of view style storytelling that allows the readers to kind of be like, it's fun to see like a what if.
It's funny. This occurred to me when I was working on Rogue One, because obviously part of that job was just thinking very deeply about Star Wars and how it functions and what it means to people and why it resonates and how fans react to it. Especially when we were doing something with Rogue One, where we were we were so closely connected, right? We had to obviously really adhere to canon, and it was kind of my job to be kind of the logic continuity cop to make sure that all of the things lined up. So, I mean, like one very small example is when, like the opening crawl, right? So it's during the battle, rebel spies stole it. So, okay, so there has to be a big battle in the third act. Great, you would want that anyway. But just little things like when they're in the Death Star conference room in the first movie, and the guy says, you've failed to conjure up the stolen data tapes. I'm writing down, okay, well, there have to be actual tapes. It has to be a physical object, which again, you want that, right? You want a physical MacGuffin where they're like handing it off, and that works really well in the film at the end. But just little things like that, and like things that you might not even think about. Like I really wanted to put Wedge at the Battle of Scarif, but I couldn't do it because we're in A New Hope. He says, look at the size of that thing. It's like he's seen the Death Star for the first time. If he'd been at Scarif, he would have seen it like the day before. Right. Yeah. And I love the fact that the other pilot who was there is like, cut the chatter. Like, we've seen this already. Yeah, we know it's a big thing. Don't worry about it. So just like tiny little kind of canonical things like that, because Star Wars fans will notice if something's not canonically correct. And this is the
why is he surprised? Yeah.
Well, this is the thing. Star Wars history is more protected and more sacrosanct than real history. Like if you make it like they made Braveheart, if you make like a World War II movie, you can change things and take liberties with history and like historical professors or people that was, that wasn't actually how it happened. But like no one like loses their shit over it. If you change something in Star Wars canon, oh my God, like you violated, so
Yeah.
it's interesting how that works. So fake history is like more policed more heavily than real history in movies.
Because it's funny how in Revenge of the Sith, General Grievous and Anakin Skywalker meet for the first time. Then George Lucas goes off and makes the Clone Wars series, which is what, seven seasons?
Yeah.
And he can't have a single episode where Anakin and Grievous come together because of that one line in Star Wars.
And the more of it, the more content you make, and it's an interesting observation, they've made more live action filmed Star Wars content in the last 4 years than in the previous 40.
Yeah.
Right. When you think about it,
in terms of hours, like
in terms of just hours of television, because it's primarily a TV thing now.
Yeah.
The more every time you make something, it gets put into the canon bank, right, and then that becomes something that is like locked in. And you can get clever with it. You can do little retcons and stuff like that that bend canon but don't break it. I've always personally thought though that the canon thing is like really like again, like The Last Jedi the comic book isn't exactly the same as the movie, but like does that mean that one is less or more canonical than the other? When I did the certain point of view stories, people are like, well, are these canon? I'm like, I don't even know how to answer that. Like, what does it mean? Like, it's all just different degrees of stuff that's made up. Like, none of it's real. So what is the need for something to be quote unquote canonical? I don't know.
We say it on this show whenever we're talking about one of the live action shows and someone's complaining that a character doesn't look the same as they do in this book or in that comic book where they might have originated. Which is like it's the same as when a new artist comes onto a run of comics. It's a different interpretation. It doesn't lessen one from the other. They're both just as good as the other. Take what you want to like.
Like an artist may draw Han Solo to look like Harrison Ford. Another might draw Han Solo to look like Alden Ehrenreich. They might draw him to look like they do in the holiday special, in the animated show. Like it's just the character. And we've been getting a lot of that with animated characters coming over to live action and stuff, and people going crazy because they recreated a scene from the show Rebels in Ahsoka, and Ahsoka's wearing something completely different, and people are, what does this mean? And it's just like I'm not much of a reader, unfortunately. My wife is. She's the reader in the family, and she's read both the first two from a certain point of view books, and she's read stories to me while bed because they're the perfect bite-sized chunks. And so I'll just sit there and listen, and I love those stories. It's like Tales from Jabba's Palace. It's like when I was growing up, because I grew up
from Jabba's Palace.
Because that's all we had back then. Like I'm an original trilogy guy. I was born in 77. And so like we had almost like 17 years with just, 2 Ewok movies, and that was it before the special editions came out.
Did you ever see the Tales of Jabba's Palace where it was like Han Solo was on trial for shooting Greedo in the cantina? You remember this? And
I totally remember that one. That's great.
Like, we've got it was Greedo was on trial for I can't remember what it was. No, I think it was Han was on trial for shooting Greedo, and it was like, well, we've got the footage right here, and it this is like Han's putting this up in his defense. Look, clearly Greedo shoots first, as you can see, but then the Greedo's lawyer shows up and says, I've got evidence that footage was doctored, and here's the original footage right here where clearly Han shoots first. And it's just just make it like just little meta jokes like that, right?
Yeah.
And again, you can't take this stuff to I think the key to enjoying Star Wars or any kind of fandom is like you can't take it too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Just let it be fun.
It's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
I know people get mad when George Lucas says things like Star Wars is made for 12-year-olds.
But it is.
I know, but it is. And that's
let me put it this way: it's made for 12-year-olds of all ages. That's how I would put it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's exactly it. Like you can be 6 years old and love it as much as you can when you're 60. It's right. There's no difference.
It shouldn't be taken more serious than your inner 12-year-old. I think
there you go.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
And when I was 12, I ate up those Ewok movies.
Yeah,
James watched.
You did that last year as well.
but that's nostalgia again. Yeah. James watched those for the first time recently. Didn't care for them, but for me, it's one of those things where like that's all the Star Wars I had. growing up. Like I had the 3
Yeah,
movies.
the 90s
that I
were
watched
rough,
every
right?
weekend.
Because, you know,
Yeah.
it was largely video games that got me through that period. I don't think the video games get enough
X-Wing.
credit. It was because that was the only Star Wars that was like on screen with music, with voice. It was the closest thing to like filmed Star Wars that yes, there were books and comics, but like if you wanted to like watch Star Wars and hear the music and feel like you were immersed in it, like I said, X-Wing, TIE Fighter, Dark Forces, like those games got us through.
I was gonna say, and you start getting into the full motion video stuff,
and then Rebel Assault.
Rebel Assault 2.
Rebel Assault 2 had
Rogue
the first live action footage.
Yep.
Yeah.
We
covered that episode a while back, and it's crazy to go back and see some of that full motion video, but it was what we had at the time. It was great. I loved it. I was like 7, 8, 9 years old around then, and that was all just new Star Wars for me.
Yeah, it looked great.
Which for me, when the prequels came out, I wasn't the biggest fan when they initially came out, but I still went and saw Phantom Menace like 9 times at the theater because it was summer and it was hot and I can go get some air conditioning. But also, I had waited my entire like teenage years and into my 20s like without being able to see Star Wars on the big screen. So even if I didn't care for the story, I still got to see Obi-Wan on the big screen.
And the same with the special editions. I must have seen The Empire Strikes Back 100 times or more on video at home. But when they did the special edition, to sit there and watch that scene with Vader and Luke, you know, the battle on in Cloud City, when you see it like blown up on the big screen as it's meant to be seen, like it's magic. It's like, oh my God, like I understand why this has such the resonance.
The AT-ATs, which I've seen, you know, on a I think the biggest TV I had as a kid was a 27-inch TV. Yeah. And I was watching the letterbox version, so the AT-ATs were always so small. Seeing that first shot through the binoculars.
Oh my God,
the big
it's
screen,
terrifying, right?
It looks massive, and I'm like, I've never realized that these actually looked massive.
You get the sort of imposing nature of them a lot more. Yeah.
And the music. You're just enveloped by everything.
We're going to get to Rogue One at some point, I'm sure, because I'm sure that is probably what people talk to you most about, Gary. But me and my partner are watching through Rebels at the moment. It's a rewatch for me, and it's her first time.
Okay.
And over lunch, we just watched Warhead, and we got to the credits.
That was a fun one.
Yeah. That's a Gary episode. I knew that you had a few in there. I'm a big fan of Wedge as well, so I was very happy with the Antilles extraction. I've talked about it in the past when I was in the room at Celebration London when they showed the season 3 trailer,
right?
And everyone then went nuts for Thrawn, and then I was like the one guy in the crowd just going nuts when you saw Wedge on screen. I was like, yeah, there he is. That's what I've been waiting for.
It's always fun to see what different people react to.
Yeah. But yeah, Warhead, we were watching it this afternoon, and it is, as you said, it's such a fun episode. It's got sort of elements of a Terminator story in there, but it's also got probably the most AP5 other than his introduction episode.
Yeah, AP5's fun. So the way it works when you work on Rebels, like everyone, it's similar to most TV shows. I think you sit in a writer's room and everyone kind of breaks the stories collaboratively. But if it's an idea that you pitched or you seem to kind of have more ownership of it, like as the story develops, eventually they'll decide like who's going to write each episode. And I was like I'm writing the Antilles. There's no way I'm not writing the Wedge origin story. There was some back and forth on whether or not that was going to be Biggs, and I was like, no, Wedge is more. It would have been equally good with Biggs, I guess. But I don't know. Wedge is. I've got a soft spot for Wedge. The only person to participate in the destruction of both Death Stars.
Hero of the Rebellion.
Yeah, right. And so I just thought it'd be really fun. So and it's a really good Sabine episode too. Like Sabine, it's really Sabine's episode. And my other favorite, I don't know how many people, I'm just surprised how many people did pick up on this. I love doing the little Easter eggs. I used to have that Kenner toy, the TIE fighter, that when you popped it, the wings would pop off to simulate it being, it was like the wings fall off, but it was supposed to be like the TIE fighter being destroyed. I pitched Dave this idea. It was like, like when they disable the TIE fighters, when the Empire like do the remote disable, the wings should pop off like on the original toys. And Dave's like, well, we're doing that. And it happened. It's like, no one's going to spot it. But then I got inundated. We go, oh, my toy used to do that. And so people will spot like the deepest cuts. It was a really fun one. Antilles was fun. When Kathu job was really fun because, Hondo as Morrigan, always fun to write for.
Yeah.
Warhead, as you said, is just a really fun bottle episode. And then the last one I did was the first part of the two-parter, In the Name of the Rebellion, which was great for me because I got to go back to writing Saw Gerrera, and it's the one that kind of touches on Rogue One the most. So yeah, really enjoyed that.
Is working on a part 1 of 2, is that the same process? Is that the same, or did you come in with a pitch for that episode? Or?
We broke the, I don't remember how, I mean, I think it was inevitable that like we knew that by the final season of Rebels it would be butting right up against Rogue One, and there was no way to like not have them connect. Plus the movie had just come out and it made sense to have the two kind of cross connect. And it just made sense. And we loved Saw. We wanted to bring him back. And that was one that I didn't have. It just made sense that I would do that one, right? So it was actually really good for me because there were things that I wanted to do. I didn't get to do everything I wanted to do in the movie for good reasons. I really wanted to have. I was always fascinated me that Saw and Mon Mothma represented these like two very different viewpoints of like how to prosecute the war against the Empire. That Mon Mothma is very diplomatic and she's wise, but like she's a little bit squeamish about like going all out, whereas Gerrera is much more like, no, you've got to play by their rules. Like you don't want to lose. And that all came from Gareth on Rogue One saying like Star Wars has always been black and white. Like you watch the first 3 movies, there's no question who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. He says, I'm more interested in shades of gray. So I want to see rebels that are like, at what point are you no longer a freedom fighter and you start to be a terrorist, right? Like, because Gerrera did some bad shit. And like it's mentioned in Rogue One where Mon Mothma says like we've disowned him, but like the stuff that he's doing still comes back on us. Like he's like politically like a
liability,
a liability for us at this point. But I always wanted to have that scene where Saw and Mon Mothma would like just go head to head and like have their debate about like how best to fight this war. And we got to do that in Rebels. So, and Forrest came back to do the voice, and like it just felt like I felt like I finally got to check that box that I wanted to do in the movie.
It really does feel that he is someone who loves playing that character and is willing to do it.
Because I mean, he came back for Andor, he came back for Jedi Fallen Order, right? Like, he's played that character a bunch now. I think he's the most interesting character in Rogue One because he's it's great. Yeah, I would like if someone said to me like, what would you want to do if you were to write more for like from the world of Rogue One? I would write more Saw because I think he's fascinating.
I do too. He's upon like many rewatches of Rogue One, he's become I think my favorite part of that film as well.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is as you said, he's in Andor now at the moment, and it's great to see him whenever they use him. They use it again, it's sparingly at the moment, but that's I think key. It works so well because he is someone that shouldn't be at the forefront at this point. He's sort of doing his own thing.
And I'm so glad we got him to come back from the animated show, because they don't always do that, right? Like,
no, of course.
Sometimes when it's a live action version and they want the live action actor doesn't always do the animated voice. Sometimes they do, and you think maybe with Forrest Whitaker, man, he's like a big name actor, he might not want to come back, but he did, and he came and he was terrific. That's
great. Rogue One, how does you coming onto Rogue One, how does that process begin? Did you go in because everyone sort of heard the story about was it John Knoll who had like initial story idea of the Death Star plans being stolen? How are you brought on to work on that?
John came up with the idea. I found this all out later. What happened was I was like standing in line at a Popeye's fried chicken, scrolling on my phone, and the news broke that Disney had bought Lucasfilm. And if you remember at the time, the initial announcement, there wasn't very much. It was they're going to do episode 7, 8, 9, and Michael Arndt's going to write the screenplay. This is before JJ. JJ came later, right? It was Michael Arndt was the only name that was mentioned. And so I immediately called my agent and said, "You got to get me a meeting." And he was like, "Yeah, you and everybody else, like take a number." Like every writer in Hollywood right now is on the phone to their agent because, of course, it's Star Wars. And so I never thought that it would come to anything because look, I've had a couple of movies made. I've got a career in Hollywood, but there are 100, if not more, writers in Hollywood who would be ahead of me on that list. Because with Star Wars, you have the luxury of like, you can get anybody. I remember sitting around with Gareth talking about Saw Gerrera. It's like, who would play Saw Gerrera? And Gareth's like, Forrest Whitaker. I was like, man, do you think we could get him? And there was someone else in the room who said, it's Star Wars. I think we can get him.
Yeah, especially at that point in time as well.
At that point in time when it was still fresh and new, and like everybody wanted to be a part of it. It was not difficult to cast those movies. And you also have the luxury of just like casting relative unknowns. Like apart from like Donnie Yen and maybe Forrest, like at the time, like Felicity was not a big star. Who would have heard of Diego Luna, right? But you just get to cast Ben Mendelsohn, right? Who's now a big star, but wasn't at the time. I remember Gareth saying like, "Oh, I know who's going to play Krennic. It has to be Ben Mendelsohn." I'm like, "Who?" And he sent me some clips. And so you just get to cast the best actor for the role rather than like, oh, we need big names in this movie, because you don't. Star Wars is the big name. People are going to show up, and that's one of the luxuries of it. Right? Exactly right. And so where were we? I've digressed again.
Jumping onto Popeyes. Yeah, we were at Popeyes.
Oh, so I was at Popeyes, and my agent said, like, I'll make a call, but like, don't get your hopes up. And then sometime later, I got a call from Lucasfilm asking me if I wanted to come in, and their main campus is in San Francisco, where I live. And it was really, I mean, I would have gone anywhere, obviously, but I went over and met with them, and it was a very general, casual meeting. I didn't know what it was about. They still hadn't announced any plans. There was no news about like spin-offs or standalones, but like I knew, because it's common sense, there was going to be more than just 7, 8, 9, right? There was going to be video games, comic books, you know, or maybe TV, all kinds of other things. But I had no idea what. And I thought, honestly, like, given my stature as a writer, like number 101 on the list, like at best, that they'd be talking to me about a game or a book or a comic spin-off. And I would have been having to do anything in the Star Wars universe. And they just had me talk about, they didn't tell me anything at all. They were just kind of like sounding me out. And I asked them at the time, I said, do you want me to pitch you an idea? And they're like, no, I just want to talk to you. And as I later found out, they already knew what they wanted to do. They were just trying to find the right writers for those projects. And I talked to them about how I cried at the end of Return of the Jedi when I was 11 years old, and how I used to take my Han Solo action figure and put him in the ice cube tray and freeze him in carbonite and like thaw him out under the warm tap. And just spoke about like my love of Star Wars and how it's, you know, it was a big reason why I do what I do for a living. And they went, okay, well, you know, nice talking to you. And off I went, none the wiser. And then nothing happened for like 3 or 4 weeks. I was like, okay, yeah, it was a great meeting, but like nothing's going to happen. They've got bigger names. And then they called me back and said, we're going to send you a document to look at for a project that we like you for. It's going to be PDF. This is the beginning of me understanding how secretive this is. It's going to be an encrypted PDF. Someone else is going to call you on a different number with the passcode to unlock the PDF, because this is what they're like. Wow. And I'd already signed all kinds of NDAs at this point. And I opened up the document, and it was this 2-page thing that John Knoll had written called Destroyer of Worlds. And I read it, and I called them back, and I said, I genuinely think you've sent me the wrong document, because this appears to be like an idea for like a live action feature film. Yeah, and they, well, I mean, listen, the working title of Rogue One was Los Alamos for a reason. Makes sense. And again, they said Destroyer of Worlds, right? It all went back to Oppenheimer, and the Death Star was the Empire's Manhattan Project, right? And so I said, yeah, this can't be right. And then, no, what do you think? I was like, oh God, I mean, yes, of course. Went back in and met John, and now I do have to pitch because I know what it is. And I thought a lot about what I wanted to do, and obviously I was really, really nervous to meet John, because I grew up reading all the making of books. I know who John Knoll is. You know, the guy who invented Photoshop, like on top of everything else. I mean, he's a legend. And John is very dry. I love him to death, but he's very dry, and he doesn't give you much. Like, he'll sit there and just take you all in, but he doesn't go, oh, I like that. Like, he just kind of sits there. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever heard of comedians talk about how awful it is to audition for SNL, because you audition for Lorne Michaels, and Lorne Michaels doesn't laugh. He thinks things are funny, but he just doesn't laugh. And so you think you're bombing, but like he's secretly going, oh, this person's funny, but he gives you nothing in the audition. And that was kind of like what it was like with John. But I pitched him this idea, which was like, this is an old-fashioned World War II men on a mission movie. This is the Guns of Navarone. This is the Dirty Dozen. This is Where Eagles Dare. And I showed him a picture that I had of Clint Eastwood and Richard Burton from Where Eagles Dare. If you remember, they dress up like the Nazi officers to infiltrate like the Nazi fortress on top of this mountain that's somewhere in the Bavarian Alps or wherever. I said, this is the movie, right? But they're dressed up like imperial officers, and the Bavarian Alps is like the base where they're building the Death Star. And it's a heist movie. It's a men on a mission movie. It's, they're gonna have to put the team together and all that great shit that we love, but like in a Star Wars context. And again, John just kind of started going, gives you nothing. And then I came back here, and I then found out that they had liked that, and now I have to meet Gareth. And I came in and met Gareth. He and I hit it off like we're both Brits from the same, both very kind of like, I don't know if you've ever spoken to Gareth, but he's very kind of down to earth, very kind of like rumpled, and like he always looks like he just fell out of bed, but like he's a genius. I'm going to go see his new movie next week. The Creator looks absolutely incredible.
We were talking about it. Looks great.
Nobody makes movies that look like Gareth's movies.
No,
they're just unbelievable, and it's all him. Like that's like ILM are doing the effects, but like he's the one saying this is what I want to see.
Yeah,
and there was
he could be doing the effects if he wanted to be doing the effects.
I mean, he did for Monsters, right? And so I
right.
did. There was so many times when I would sit, because I remember like I just wanted to shadow Gareth as much as possible. I would say like, can I just come and sit in the ILM meetings? Again, I'm digressing, but like I would say like, can I come and sit with you? And he goes, yeah. And I would listen to like the direction that he would give the ILM artists. And I remember thinking like he's so fun, like he knows exactly what he wants. Like he sees it in his head, like he's just trying to like communicate that to these artists, and that's why the movie looks as good as it does.
I think it's the best looking Star Wars movie.
It looks incredible. I'll give you one example of it. So I think it was me. I pitched to Gareth the idea was like, we have an A wing, a B wing, an X wing, and a Y wing. Let's do another letter. So let's create the U wing. Like we knew that we wanted a troop transport. And so let's create the U wing, and you know, because they all look like vaguely like the letter, apart from the B wing, they all look like the letter of the alphabet.
Well, the B, if you lay it sideways, it kind of looks like a lowercase b a little bit.
My understanding is that it's from Blade Wing because it looks like a knife. If you think of it looks like the top part looks like the hilt of a knife, and the other part is the blade. I always say B wing is for Best Wing because it's my favorite. It's my favorite ship. The Rebels episode where they test fly the B wing is so cool.
It's great fun.
So U wing, right? And that's a fairly simple brief to give to an artist, right? Like create the new alphabet Rebel ship, right? And it's
vaguely U-ish.
It's a vaguely U-ish.
Yeah.
I guess the X and the Y are the ones that look most like them, right? The A is kind of vaguely kind of triangular.
Yeah.
And the cockpit kind of has the negative space in the A.
It's just whatever. But like we wanted to do something that looks vaguely like a U, and of course in the end it does with the twin prongs and everything.
Yeah.
And Gareth would sit down, and these ILM guys had come up with like 8 different designs, and they were all beautifully ready. You could tell they had spent like hours on each one, but Gareth didn't like any of them. He said, look, I want to use our time better. He said, rather than you spending like an hour on one design, here's what I want to do. We're going to do an exercise called 60-second ships. And I don't want you to spend more than 60 seconds designing each one. And I want to see 50 ideas that didn't take you more than a minute each. And once I see like the skeleton, here's the thing, this is the genius thing, is think about when you were a kid, like when you would draw Star Wars ships in your notebook or whatever.
Yeah.
All the great designs of like the classic iconic spaceships are things that kids can draw really easily. If I said to you, draw an X-Wing or draw a TIE fighter, you can do it in 5 seconds, right? Or even the Enterprise, you can draw that. You know what the Enterprise looked at. It's a big fucking dish and 2 nacelles, and it's like right from the silhouette, you just know what that is.
There's a reason that so many people have like just the stick figure tattoos of X-Wings and TIE fighters around.
So it has to be something that can be rendered. There's a skeletal frame to it that is that, and then you can iterate on it. But like that's what Gareth wanted. He wanted basically the version that a kid would draw in their notebook. And that's how, and eventually he found one that he liked. So go, now flesh that out. And that's how we found the U-wing. And that, again, that was to me an example of like, he knows exactly how to get where he wants to get.
Yeah.
So I met with Gareth. He and I hit it off. He was editing Godzilla at the time. He jumped right off of Godzilla onto he would literally like be in the edit bay at Warner Brothers, and then Disney's right across the street. He would come over and meet with me at the Disney offices in Burbank, the Lucasfilm offices. And we would talk, and we would like go back and forth. And then I had to meet Kathy, which I was super nervous about. And then eventually I had to meet Alan Horn and Alan Bergman, who were the 2 like big cheeses at Disney at the time. And had to pitch them. And it was after every meeting, it was like, there's just what, do we have the job yet? Do we have the job there? And they were like, one more meeting. And then after the Allens meeting, we came out. And Gareth and I like now, and Kathy said, now you can go make a movie. And we were like, awesome. So yeah, and that's how it started.
And I've met Gareth in a party setting, and again, if anybody has the chance to hang out with Gareth,
He's so down to earth, right? Like you
he's
wouldn't think
such
he's like a
nice
big
guy.
Hollywood film director to meet him, right?
We were standing. It was a tiki themed party.
Okay.
We were standing under a heat lamp. I didn't wear a hat, and my head is shaved because I'm balding. And he took his little captain's hat that he was wearing and put it on my head because it was getting too hot. And then we just hit it off. And still, this was after Rogue One, and was just wanted to talk about 1977 Star Wars. I just call it Star Wars. Some people call it New Hope. Just absolutely love that his enthusiasm for Star Wars is.
Yeah, I mean, he's a bigger
so
fanboy than I was. Like he was. I mean, I mean, that movie. I don't think he's a filmmaker without that movie.
No, and I think he shows,
and that's true for so many filmmakers of that generation.
Yeah,
right? But specifically with, I know he would ask early on, will I get to meet George? Will I get to meet George? And he eventually, and they were like, you can, but you don't need to. But he did eventually come to the set, and I know that was a real treat for Gareth.
That's awesome. That's really nice.
Right.
I like it when things like that happens. George, it's one of those things. But again, people sort of just like, oh no, George hates all of this. It's like he doesn't. I'm sure. Well, I don't know. I don't want to put words in his mouth.
Well, I know that George called Gareth after the movie and told him that he really liked it, and that was probably his biggest thrill. It was funny. So George, I wasn't there that day, but George did come to the set one day and toured the production office, and of course, everyone's like, everything's been tidied up and looks nice and neat. Somebody told me once that the Queen of England used to think that the world smells like paint, because anytime she goes anywhere, it's been painted the day before to make it all look like fresh and new. And so everyone's kind of tidying up, and George comes in. And if you've ever been to a production office, you see they've got all the models and all the production art storyboards are up on the walls because it's a working office. And Gareth was giving him a tour. And there's all this art up on the wall. This is stuff that isn't necessarily in the movie yet, but like 50 different concepts of something. And anytime George would point at something and go, that's cool, Gareth was like, that's in the movie now, like 100%. Like he's
amazing.
Blessed by George.
And
they had the U-wing model, like it was, I don't know, maybe this big, like they built it as a physical model. Like, they do like a clay. I don't know exactly how they make it, but it's a sculpted model. And it wasn't painted or anything. It just looked like gray clay, but it was really detailed. And George said, oh, that's cool. What is that? And Gareth said, oh, that's the U-wing. That's like the new ship. He goes, oh, I like it a lot. And at the end, Gareth said, would you be good enough to like sign something before you go? And he gave him a Sharpie, and George signed the U-wing model. And it was brilliant. But after he left, everyone was like, oh, fuck, like we can't paint it now. We had to build a new one because they couldn't possibly paint over George's autograph on the U-wing model. So yeah, they were.
And now Gareth has to. Gareth now just has to like. He's like, well, I only wanted something that I could put on my wall. Now I've got to have this massive U-wing somewhere.
Yeah, high class problems to have.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, one of the first things that Gareth showed me when I told him that I was a massive Star Wars fan and that I liked Rogue One. Also, I'm a big Godzilla fan and I loved his film Monsters. Like, meeting him was a thrill. But the first thing he did was he held up his phone, and his lock screen was George Lucas kind of looking miserable behind the scenes of the original Star Wars. And he said, I put this on my lock screen the day I got Rogue One. And it was still on there well after. Just a nice reminder. But so yeah, like I can't imagine what it would be like to meet George Lucas. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but let alone meeting George Lucas while you have a room full of design setup sounds like a nightmare, because we've all seen the footage from the prequels with his markers, and he's just nope, like fully formed.
Yeah, I mean, like, and one word from him could kill you, right? I mean, I think a lot about that. That line in Bob Iger's autobiography where he talks about when they sat down George Lucas to watch Force Awakens for the first time, and at the end of it, he stood up and said, "There's nothing new." And I was like, can you imagine hearing that from George Lucas?
Yeah.
So it's one. That was why they asked me. I said, I'd rather not, because they say never meet your heroes. If you have one bad, what if it's a bad interaction? Like, what if I met Lawrence Kasdan at the premiere, And of course, Lawrence, who wrote not only, you know, Empire and Jedi, but also Raiders of the Lost Ark and a bunch of other amazing shit. I did remember like when Chris Farley used to interview people on SNL and like he was trying to be an interviewer, but he was just like embarrassing himself all the time. Stupid. Like that's how I felt like the whole time I was talking to him. When it's so nerve-wracking.
Like,
to meet
what do you?
heroes.
It's hard. Like, what do you say? Like, that's not going to sound dumb. Like you
and he hasn't heard a million times before,
Jones,
right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, Gary, when we got you to agree to come onto this show, I was like, shit, I'm sure that we're going to cover stuff that he's covered a million times before, and I feel bad about that. But I'm just like, we're going to ask it.
It can't be avoided. And the thing is, there's always a certain amount of stuff that I've like almost got like rehearsed answers for at this point. But like, there's always every interview that I do, like someone asks me something that I'm like, oh, you know, I actually haven't thought about that. So there's always something there. Yeah.
That's it. We will stake our claim into Animal Crossing. Though, I mean, probably haven't, as you said. I'm sure that people have talked about that a million times.
Right.
So that's sort of jumping into Rogue One, how you got started on that. You mentioned how you weren't on set for much of it. Did you get to visit while they were actually shooting, while they were in production?
Yeah, I was there for a few days.
Awesome.
I was there at I was there on the Rebel base. I was there at Yavin 4, which was
that's
actually
where you need to be, I think.
A place called Cardington Sheds, which is it's the biggest like enclosed space in England. It's just a massive, like basically like an aircraft hangar where you could park like a massive Zeppelin, right? Like it's like an airship. It's huge. And they built the Rebel base there, and it was built in a completely contiguous way so that you could walk from like the Rebel briefing table through the base and outside to where all the X-Wings are parked, like on the tarmac. It was all one contiguous thing. And it was incredible. And probably the most emotional moment I had was when I walked onto that set for the first time, because they had pulled all the original blueprints, and it was like walking onto like Elstree in 1975, and like I almost cried. I was like, holy shit. One of my favorite photographs is me and John Knoll standing at the Rebel table, the
briefing table
cleared the planet. Like that's we were at that table. I was like, oh my god, this is ridiculous.
It's incredible.
R2D2 will roll by and you're like, this is nuts. It was so cool.
I mean, I get that when the first time I went to like Disneyland, Galaxy's Edge, and saw a real Millennium Falcon for the first time, I lost it. Like and that's like just a theme park thing. But
we got to do that too, because when we were going to be on all the same sets as Force Awakens, and they as soon as they wrapped, they were going to clear all the sets and build the Rogue One sets on the same sound stages. So we went ostensibly to like recon the stages, but everything was still up. Right, the Falcon was there, and they said, "Do you want to sit in the cockpit?" And we were like, "You fucking kidding?"
Yeah, of course. Just show us where it is. Like, don't ask. Yeah,
walking up that ramp onto the Falcon, it was unbelievable. Like,
that's what you can't do at the parks, and it's I want to so bad. I know I'll get kicked out and banned for life if I hop that little fence.
You surely still know some people there, Ralph. Like you've got to know some people.
I used to work for the park in third shift.
Because I've not done it. When you do the ride at Galaxy's Edge where you sit in the cockpit of the Falcon, like how do you get there? Do you not walk through the interior of the Falcon to do it?
So this is the brilliant thing. What they do is the line is outside where the Falcon is. And you go, what's great about I'm kind of giving it away, the surprise, but you go around the back of the Falcon and you can see everything under the ship. Here, I'll show you. So you're walking, the line goes around here, and then goes inside a building, and you start going up a ramp.
Mm-hmm.
But what you can't tell from the outside is there's a balcony up here.
Okay.
Goes around, and you get to see down at the top of the Falcon as well.
Okay.
So when you get into the attraction, you get into a room with Hondo's there. The animated or the animatronic Hondo is there. And in the background is a screen that represents, I don't know, the hangar where the Falcon will end up.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear it rumbling behind you where you just were in line, and it rumbles above you, comes up to the screen behind Hondo, and then you go in through that door into like a jetway that you would go to
Okay, but you're not going up the ramp that they go up in the film.
You're not going up the ramp.
Okay.
It's almost as if they put a jetway, one of those jetway things like at an airport, up against the sort of
like an airlock type situation.
The side port here, and you walk in that way. But
Smart way of getting around it.
It's magical. I mean, when you set foot on and see the chessboard, and they let you wander, and you can press every button in there, and it does something. Sitting at the chessboard is just like,
we sat at the
chessboard. I know this is the theme. Yeah. It's the theme park version, but still, it's like, and I'm sure the version you went on had like studio lights and stuff above it.
Well, no, it's actually in some ways you got a better experience than I did, because we were there on a day that the set was dark, so none of it was lit up, right? So we're at the cockpit, but everything's dark, like none of the lights are on.
Right.
I tried like hitting it like that, but nothing worked.
But it's there. I mean, I've been watching this. I was 3 months old when Star Wars came out. I've been a fan my entire life, and sitting at a chessboard in the Falcon is like insane. And then going into the cockpit, and the way they have it set up inside, it feels like a maze. So they might take you through sort of the access panel closet, or they might take you through the main hallway, or they may take you through the other side, and it all eventually leads to the cockpit or a cockpit,
right?
So able to get people through. But when you're standing there just staring and that cockpit opens, I know it's the theme park version, but still, like, it wakens your 12-year-old.
It
wakens.
Now, the thing is, again, I know, because again, I've not been, but I know that there is like, there's the chair you don't want to get stuck in, right? There's like the pilot and the co-pilot, but then there's like one in back that is not the best seat to be in. Is that right?
The thing is, when you're the pilot and the co-pilot, you're so concentrating on what to do. You don't have the time to sit back and just enjoy it. So when you're sitting in one of the back seats, you just get to sit back and enjoy the fact that you're flying in
the Falcon.
You still get to press some buttons, but it's like a a lab rat. Press this button when it turns green. Okay, I did that. Oh, this one turned green. Okay, I did that.
The best experience I ever had like that was actually at the old Star Trek hotel at the Star Trek Hilton in Las Vegas. And if you ever remember doing this, I think they do a similar gag with the Rise of the Resistance ride now. But it's amazing. They have this thing. It's like you're basically going on a tour of the Star Trek museum, and they have like a timeline of the future. Ephraim Cochrane invents the first warp drive and all this stuff, first contact, and blah blah blah. And then they get to a point where you're all standing together like in this big circular area, and then the lights go down and you hear this big whoosh and the transporter sound, and then when the lights come back up, you're standing on like the transporter pad on the Enterprise. And it's like, how the fuck did that just happen?
Yeah.
And of course what they do is when the lights go down, they're rotating everything around you. And so the transporter room's always there. It's just it's behind a wall, and then they rotate the wall away. But the effect is like, oh shit, you really do feel like you just beamed up. And I have a similar thing. There's a Starfleet officer, come here, we got to get you. And they run you through, and then you're standing on the bridge of the Galaxy class Enterprise. Super nerd chills. It was so cool.
Rise of the Resistance has a similar thing where you do enter a transport to one side, and you assume you're going to leave out the other side and do more Star Wars stuff, but the same door opens up and you're being stared down by like hundreds of stormtroopers,
right?
And I don't think I'll ever, like, if I get to be 77 years old, like I'm still gonna be thrilled by Star Wars no matter what, even if it's there's still parts of the prequels that I don't like, but guess what, there's another thing coming next that I really do like.
Yeah.
And I do like the prequels for being different. I do, The Force Awakens, there's nothing new in it, but it kind of had to.
By the way, those aren't my words. As I said, I never talk about the other movies. I'm just telling you what George is reported to said in the book.
I totally get where George is coming from, though. But at the same time, George was like, let's push this. Like the prequels, he went a complete left turn. But it's great because I would rather have new, fresh Star Wars. But I do like that comforting feeling. Rogue One gave me a comforting feeling.
I mean,
completely new.
It's funny. A couple of things. First of all, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I kind of feel, and I don't even really track like the Star Wars discourse that closely anymore, but I've got this sense in the last couple of years that the prequels are kind of undergoing a bit of a reassessment right now, where people are kind of reconsidering them, going, maybe they weren't that bad. Like there's enough distance now, you can kind of appreciate them a little bit more. Everyone had that kind of like, what the fuck is this when the movies first came out, right? Because they're so different. but I don't know. I kind of feel like there's a generation now that's grown up with them that appreciate them more. I do think they did some really interesting things. There are some genuinely like really cool moments, right? When I still remember the first when Yoda first pulls the lightsaber out in Attack of the Clones, and everyone's like, "Holy shit! Like this is what we wanted to see." And then you're like, "Okay, but how's he actually going to fight?" And then he's like fucking spinning around. He's like, "Oh my god, that's how he would do it! It looks so cool!" Like they actually pulled off some really amazing stuff. I still love how he takes out the Imperial Guards with just like that, and they're just gone.
They're nothing. Yeah,
so much fun.
And that's something that we had been waiting for, to see the Imperial Guards fight forever.
Yeah,
we had the
toy, we had the Kenner toy. Yeah,
and then we're like, okay, here they are. They're in this movie. We're going to see him fight, and Yoda's like, no.
I think as well, like that came from like the EU side of it, where there was the Crimson Empire comics where they were all badasses, and like how people think of the Mandalorians now and everything. It's like, no, they're just guards. They're just like other guys, and it's Yoda, so he is just gonna flick his wrist, and they're gonna be nothing. So
no, it's good.
Yeah,
it's good
loads
stuff.
of fun.
And what's great is you can draw the ships.
I do remember. The one thing I'll say about the first movie is this: I enjoyed it when I first saw it. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and then after, I started to kind of think, wait, I think I know why. I remember coming out like, this feels like Star Wars. That felt like that was the thing. Like, can you make it feel like the old Star Wars? And I wasn't in the room because JJ came before me, but I kind of feel like JJ's philosophy, and this is why this will begin to make things right, was like the mission statement at the beginning was like, okay, so the prequels were kind of like this weird sushi that people like weren't ready for. People just want spaghetti and meatballs again. They want like Star Wars comfort food, and I'm gonna give you that. So it's gonna check all the boxes.
Get them back in, basically.
And they really did check them, right? So you know, young dreamer on a desert planet finds secret rebel plans in a droid, gets chased off the planet, escapes in the Millennium Falcon, gets chased around the galaxy by a dude in a black mask and a lightsaber, and at the end they blow up the Death Star, right? Like
and an old mentor dies, like
exactly. So I mean, they really did like check the boxes, and that's why initially you went, oh yeah, it feels just like the old Star Wars, because it very much is the old Star Wars. You know, I arguably to a fault, it's really the old Star Wars.
But I love spaghetti and meatballs too.
And again, I think Ryan's movie was a reaction to that. I think you voted. I can't speak for Ryan, but the philosophy of that film that I take from it as an audience member is, I think you were too
safe.
You were too faithful to the original. You were too. I'm trying to think of the right word. Like, you're too deferential to the original. You've got to move forward, and I'm going to try to move us forward. And then the third one was like, no, let's go back. Let's go back again. So it's really, really interesting to see like the movies kind of back and forth. I still think it's funny, the one time in history that they were pretty much certain they were going to get to make all three films, that there was no overarching plan for all three films. It was like, okay, now you do the next chapter. It's like, you know,
that's one of the things that I think shines now when I watch the prequels, is that it was George. George kind of had that plan, that three movie plan, and I find that the more I watch him, the more I pick up on sort of, there is some subtleties in there that I find intriguing. Now
you have to remember the new trilogy was actually made in a way that's more like, because you know, you can talk about the Journal of the Wills and 9 movies and all that stuff, but George, I promise you, George didn't know he was going to make the first movie. Could have just been the first movie, and that would have been a natural endpoint. They blow up the Death Star. Maybe they've won now in the bigger picture, but like, no, then the movie goes and becomes one of the biggest blockbusters of all time. George is like, we have to do a second one, right? And so, but you blew up the Death Star, but the Empire is still out there, and they get to keep telling the story. And thank God, because I love Empire and Jedi. But there was no real plan, I don't think, to make 3 movies. If you remember, when they had to scramble to make Empire because everyone had gone off to make Battlestar Galactica, right? And they had to crew up all over again.
It's the heist movie, isn't it? But instead of putting the crew together, it's putting the crew back together,
bringing them back. Yeah, we're putting the band back together.
Yeah. Gary, I think we've held up your time for long enough at this point. Thank you so much for joining us, Ralph. I don't know if you've got anything else that you want to ask before we wrap up.
No, just let's do some plugs. Let's anything you want to bring up.
When this episode is coming out, your new book Gundog has just released.
Yes, the timing is quite fortuitous. Well, it's not fortuitous. It's the reason I'm here. Like I said, I'm completely shameless. When I work on something like Star Wars, I have the luxury of knowing that there's going to be a multi-million-dollar marketing machine behind it. And like the PR people just say, block out Tuesday because you're going to do 30 interviews back to back, like rolling calls with journalists from all over the world. And like, it's all set up for you. And like, trust me, by the time Rogue One came out, nobody didn't know that Rogue One wasn't coming out, right? Because it was everywhere. Yeah. When I do something by myself, I don't have that luxury. So I do have this new book coming out called Gundog, which I'm really proud of. It's published. Hold on, if we're doing video.
Great.
Yeah. How fortunate that I happen to have a copy right here. This is being published by a small independent publisher. The marketing budget is zero. It's just me kind of twisting the arms of my friends to try and get them to promote the book and coming on to every podcast that will have me. And yes, I will shamelessly trade on my time spent in the Star Wars universe to come and talk to find people like you and plug my book. It's really fun. If you liked the Jyn Erso character, Dakota Bregman, who's the protagonist of Gundog, is a very similar character. If you like giant mechs, I grew up loving the whole like Japanese subculture of mecha. Gundam and Macross and Neon Genesis Evangelion and all that kind of stuff. I just love like big, massive walking tanks that kick the shit out of each other. And it always amazed me that there's not really anything like that in Western culture. And people are like, oh, what about Robot Jocks? It was like 40 years ago. Maybe Pacific Rim, right? Because those are technically mechs, right? But they're fighting. It's more of a kaiju movie.
I mean, they're really, the guys are like this big compared to the
right.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do something that was like a tribute to the Japanese mecha culture that I love so much, but to do a very, very American version of it. It's all set in the American Midwest in the Dakotas and Wyoming. There you go. Who is that? Is that
Ghidorah?
Oh, that's Ghidorah. Okay, yeah, okay.
But it's
Mecha Ghidorah. Okay. Oh wow.
Yeah. There you go.
There's a pilot in there.
there was a lot of back and forth about when we were arguing about like what constitutes a mech, and I'm like, if it's a weapon, if it's basically a giant mechanized weapon that walks on two legs and has a human pilot, it's a mech. If it's autonomous and it's just a giant robot, but like, so that's why technically the Jaegers in Pacific Rim are mechs, right? And so I wanted to do a mech story. I wrote it as a novel. Very, very hard to get stuff like that made as a film these days. Even like someone who, wrote a Star Wars movie. Would you like to make my next original science fiction movie? The answer is no, we don't. We want to make more Star Wars and more Marvel and more Harry Potter and more Lord of the Rings and more.
Give us the franchise.
Give us the franchises. Somehow forgetting that Star Wars started with somebody taking a risk on an original weird spec script. Right? Like Fast and the Furious.
Every franchise starts somewhere.
Every franchise starts with somebody taking a risk on an original idea. And I don't know, we seem to have forgotten that because now we just want to keep making the same shit that we've been making.
The creators come in. The creators come just around the corner. I'm seeing the creator.
And God bless Gareth for doing that, right? For making original science fiction and not just jumping on the next fucking Hot Wheels the movie or whatever it is they're gonna do next. And so that's my passion. I loved working on Star Wars, but my passion is to create my own original ideas and stories from whole cloth, and that's what Gundog is. Very, very difficult to get something like that made as a movie. So I wrote it as a novel. We also did our own audio book adaptation of it, which is actually out right now. If you're interested in reading the audio version, we recorded that whole thing, 9 hours of audio with Shannon Woodward from HBO's Westworld, Troy Baker from The Last of Us, full orchestral soundtrack, and I put that out last year as a 9-hour episodic podcast. That you listen to all 9 episodes, it's the whole book. And we just put that out for free just as an experiment to see what would happen. But if you want to read the book, essentially the same text, that's out now. You can order it from Amazon. You can order it from Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, wherever books are sold. And I'm told it's doing quite well. We're already going back for a second printing. So it's...
I'm still waiting for my copy. I was lucky enough to get an advanced reader copy of it back when they first came out. I think, Gary, I actually... informed you that they were being distributed at the time.
I called the publisher like, why don't I have one of these?
Out? Yeah. I got to read that one, so I've read it and I loved it, and I straight away sort of went and pre-ordered it.
Good. I'm glad.
For when hopefully it arrives tomorrow. We'll see.
Yeah. So they did a beautiful job with it. They let me pick the case. I did this really obnoxious bright yellow. I wanted to do like an industrial kind of military like yellow and black vibe for it, and they did a beautiful job with the cover. Really proud of it. First edition is going to run out really, really soon. And I know, like I said, second print run I think starts today. So if you want to get a first edition that has a secret typo in it and might be worth something when I'm dead, go grab it. Go grab it now. GUNGOD all bookstores. I'm really proud of it. And the funny thing about it now is that even though nobody wants to make movies and television out of original IP, this is kind of the mercenary part of my strategy, is like establish the, and I hate even saying words like IP. Like my big thing is like, I kind of feel like as soon as we started calling creative work content, it was over. And now it's just another widget. Now it's just another product that we can commoditize and sell. Whereas, artists like to think of it in a completely different context. But the funny thing about it is, like, for me, this is already a win, right? Like this book is on shelves. People can read it. I hear from people every day who have enjoyed it. But guess what? Now it is actually a piece of IP. Now it's a book. Now it's a podcast that was really successful. And if the book is a big seller as well, that now suddenly people go, oh, could we make a movie out of this? And like, you have to kind of like do it backwards now. It's really interesting. But even if like a screen version of it were to never happen, the book is on shelves, and like that's all I want to do is like get stories in front of
you. Have been able to tell the story that you wanted to tell
in whatever. Yeah, and that's the thing. No one messes with me when I write a book as well. Yeah. It was really it was amazing when I wrote my first book back in 2015. I came to that from a culture of working as a screenwriter, where when you're given notes, the unwritten kind of subtext of the note is, do these notes or we'll find someone who will, right? They'll just find another writer if you don't agree with the changes that need to be made, or if they're not happy with how you implement the changes. Whereas when I got notes back from my editor, I was like, I thought most of the notes were great, but every now and again I would flag one and come back and say like, I don't agree with this note. What am I supposed to do? And she was like, don't do it. It's your book. Don't do it. I'm like, oh shit, I don't get fired. And she's like, what are you talking about? And of course not. I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. So I want to write more books because I get to, like Rogue One, I'm really proud of, but I wouldn't put a percentage on it. But like a lot of things in there are mine. Like if you liked Vader's castle on Mustafar, if you liked the whole business with, it was the father that deliberately engineered the flaw into the Death Star. If you liked some other things that I think I
saw yesterday, was it, or the other day on Twitter, you saying it all started with this about a
drain.
Yeah,
if you like the Death Star dish being inserted into the thing, a lot of it is mine. If you like the opening sequence with a lot of it is mine, but a lot of it isn't. People say to me sometimes, oh, my favorite characters are Chirrut and Baze, and I always say, well, you should go tell Chris Weitz that, because those are his characters. He put those in after I left.
It's a collaborative medium.
Yeah, and it is. Like somebody said to me the other day, like, did you create K2SO? And the answer is kind of yes and no. Like John Knoll originally came up with the idea of K2SO. And he was originally just a rebel logistics droid. He looked like C3PO, but like shiny black metal. And I said, oh, it might be interesting. What if he was an Imperial droid that had been captured from the Empire and then reprogrammed to work for the rebels? And so he became that. And then my thing was like, oh, I think he would be really like mouthy, because like he's tired. He used to take orders from the Empire, but now he can say whatever he wants, because the rebels are like have a much more forgiving HR department, I think, than the Empire.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So he would mouth off a lot. And then Chris and subsequent writers came on and added to that and made his dialogue even better and more funny. And then Alan Tudyk comes in, right, and then performs him and gives him a voice and gives him motion and gives him life. And then ILM and Hal Hickel animate the eyes and make the eyes come to life. So like the answer, like who created K2SO, is like so many different people. He has so many. It
takes a village
dads.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it's like in film. So, but for that reason, I only feel like I have like partial ownership of things like that. But with something like Gundog or Book of Eli, which I can say that's all mine. Like I'll take all of the credit and all of the blame for something you liked or didn't like. And it's nice to be able to do that.
Right. Well, you said I'm a huge fan of film music. So having a score for the audiobook and me not being a strong reader, I'm definitely going to be picking
Austin Wintory, who's a friend of mine who wrote some of my favorite video game soundtracks, went and put together like a full orchestra and recorded like an hour and a half of music. Wow. We actually put out a digital soundtrack album for it because it's so cool. But yeah, if you're like, the whole reason why I discovered the idea of having to do the audio book, the original plan was me to self-publish the book. And I thought, well, shit, I have to do an audio book as well, because my wife listens to Audible all the time. She listens to audiobooks all the time, like 3 books a week. And I learned through that like fully 1/3 of all books that are sold in audio format. So it's a massive part of the market. Huge, I thought, well, shit, I have to do audio. Yeah. I thought, well, it's audio, right? How hard can it be? Well, turns out if you want to do something good, like anything, it's really fucking hard to do good audio.
Yeah.
But it was, again, during the pandemic, there were actor friends were sitting around, and Shannon and Troy volunteered all of their time, and a podcast that probably would have cost me $50 to $100,000 to do with that level of talent cost me almost nothing because they just did it for fun.
That's great.
But if you like, if your preference is to listen to a book rather than sit down and kind of read it on paper or on a screen, like I said, it's already there and it's free, and it's a really good, because Shannon really, like, she doesn't just read the book, like she performs it. And Troy plays the bad guy in it, and the music is beautiful, and we added like an ambient soundtrack, and I think it's like audiobook plus. So I definitely would recommend.
Almost like a radio drama.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is we actually did when we first debuted it. I broadcast every episode live on my Twitch channel with a live chat listening. So it was like people were reacting. Oh shit! Like when plot twists would happen, and then I would do like a discussion, author Q&A, book club thing at the end. So we got it out there in an original way. It's an experience. You try new things. Why don't we put it out this way? Like I didn't expect to make much money from Gundog, and probably never will. But it was fun just to do something like, hey, COVID sucks. Life is shitty right now. Here's a bunch of content for free. Yeah. Oh, I use the word content. Here's a bunch of creative work for free. And it was, it's just nice to get things out into the world in an industry where it's increasingly hard to do that in Hollywood. I can't even work right now, right? Because the business is so fucked. Yeah. And we don't even have any idea what the landscape's going to be like when we go back to work. It's kind of like COVID, right? The world that we went back to was not the one that we left, right? It's a different normal now. And I think when we all come back to Hollywood, whether that's before the end of the year or I think probably more likely next year at this point, it's going to be a different world, because the strike, I think, is just a symptom of a much bigger existential crisis that the Hollywood is going through right now. Well, they put billions into streaming without doing any of the math, right? And now they're going, oh shit, this isn't working, and nobody knows what to do. So God knows what's going to happen next. And so, maybe I'll just write books from now on.
Well, I mean, we're definitely rooting for the strikes to be resolved and
sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. I've got some friends in the industry as well, not in the writers or actors guilds or anything, but who are really worried about their work drying up as well. And it affects everyone else.
Influencers, there's a lot of work that they can't do.
Yeah.
Obviously, you think about like all the like carpenters and gaffers and like the people that actually make the movie, they're all sat down. It sucks. And it's all because Jeff Bezos wants a slightly bigger yacht. And that's bullshit.
It's not cool. You've got enough. Like, you see,
it's obscene, right? It's obscene. Yeah. Like, did they never go, okay, that's enough. I'm rich enough. Like, I can't possibly ever spend this much money. Like,
the world doesn't need billionaires.
I quite agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, it's turning into a political podcast now, but that's all good too.
I'm glad that we got to mention it, though. I am glad that.
You can't not mention it. It is what it is, and it's really. I talk to writers every day that are so depressed. We just want to go back to work, but the current conditions are unsustainable, and it's just a question of like how much pain and misery and suffering are the AMPTP willing to put themselves? Because they've already like Warner Brothers Discovery put up a quarterly loss that is way more than everything the WGA have asked for.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they would rather inflict pain on themselves than admit that they need us. Charlie Kaufman gave a great speech at the Writers Guild Awards recently. I think he won some kind of lifetime achievement or something. And he talked about this a lot and said, Hollywood exists on the idea of convincing us that we need them. But the truth is they can create nothing of value without us. And they're feeling that right now because there's no new fall television. Get ready for a lot of reality TV and sports and reruns this fall, because there ain't no new fall TV coming on the networks. And, the streamers have more stuff, obviously, piled up than that. Everyone's got a backlog, but that's going to run out too. And
you're already seeing delays of things start to be announced.
If it doesn't resolve soon, get ready for the first big summer with no movies.
Yeah.
Right. There's going to be no new movies in theaters. Like, it's unsustainable.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
But it's nice to see everyone sort of holding the line, essentially, like, and just like stand by it. Get what you deserve. Absolutely.
I don't know why they still think they're going to break the resolve of the guild at this point, because it is absolutely unbreakable. Like, it's not going to happen. So, it's just a question of, it can only resolve one way. It's just a question of if it's sooner or later.
When? Yeah.
And I feel like the public's behind the unions.
Oh my God. And they hired like a crisis PR firm. Like, that ain't working. It's just rip the Band-Aid off. It's such a tiny, it's like 0.02% of their earnings.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's wrap
I like
it up.
Star Wars.
Star Wars is great. Gary, the way that we end this episode, I say something, Ralph says something.
We're gonna do this,
and then why not? And then if it's just the two of us, I'll sign it off. It's normally with punch it at the end, but you can say whatever you want. If you would love to do it, we'd really enjoy.
What do you want me to do?
Just to say punch it. I'll say something, Ralph will say something, and then if you want to say punch it or whatever else you want instead of that, that'd be great.
That'll send us off. That'll send us off.
Can I give you a longer version?
Yeah, go for it. Don't give it to hate.
Celebrate the love.
I hope the old man got that tractor beam out of commission, or this is going to be a real short trip. Okay, hit it.